Welcome, my friends. Silouan here. Today, I'm going to be bringing a little bit of good news to illustrate a lesson I learned when I was a little kid. My mom used to say it all the time to me, but you are what you eat. You know, what you put into yourself eventually is what's going to come out of yourself. And you kind of see that in our culture today, don't you? Everything is in small little bites. It's not very deep. People don't really dig deep for information. I think it's one reason that there is a niche of these long podcasts that are popular, but how many people actually listen to those 3-hour podcasts? I mean, you see someone like a Joe Rogan and he might get 5 million listeners, but there's 380 million people in the United States. Think of all the people that aren't listening to that. Not to mention all our other media sources and online sources. Everything is 5 seconds and 10 seconds and 15 seconds. And what do we hear about all day? We hear about rioting and how bad the president is, or how good the president is, or what's happening in Venezuela, or what's happening in Israel or Ukraine or whatever. And it's really, I think it becomes easy to think that that's what the world is. That's what life is, okay? Like feeds off itself. I see all these people living in the greatest country in the world that thankfully people want to come to, and they want to burn it down. And I'm like, why do you want to burn it down? What are you hearing? What are you listening to? So I came across this article the other day. Happy news. The location line is Black Mountain, North Carolina. Now, as I read this, I would imagine that unless you subscribe to the news source that I downloaded this from, you have never heard of this, okay? And just ask yourself, why have I never heard of this? Why is something like this not popped up on my Facebook feed or my Instagram feed or my Google search or in the news? Boom, boom, boom. The sound reverberated through the crisp mountain air as Jake Jarvis used his excavator to pound a massive stone into place along a retaining wall. Jake, owner of Precision Grading and Disaster Relief, had volunteered to stabilize a hillside that collapsed during Hurricane Helen in September 2024, nearly taking Ray Miller's house with it. He was stabilizing a hillside. Massive stones, some weighing 7 tons, dotted Miller's driveway like tabletops fit for the Hall of the Mountain King, awaiting the excavator. Eventually, Jarvis used 500 rocks the Millers bought to create a beautiful tiered retaining wall system at no cost to Miller and his wife. He finished the project early in January after starting it in October 2025. So Jake Jarvis, owner of this grading company, for free, basically saved this elderly couple's property and allowed them to build on it again. Now, a little bit later in this article, Miller, the person who was helped, said his insurance did not pay a penny, and the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, paid only $20,000 toward an estimated $890,000 repair bill, which was far more than what the couple paid for the house. Jake Jarvis helped them out for free. But he wasn't the only one. They weren't the only ones Jake Jarvis helped out for free. Over the months, Jarvis, who volunteers his time and equipment, has helped over 350 people and businesses in these mountain communities who had lost hope, who no one had helped. Have you heard of Jake Jarvis? Look in the news. People burning things down, arguing. You think any of them have helped 350 families and businesses for free rebuild their homes? You think any of them have done anything close to what Jake Jarvis has done for free? He or his company's workers have been volunteering for more than 450 days straight since the hurricane hit in September 2024. Jake and his crew have single-handedly rebuilt roads, bridges, used by state vehicles to reach hard-hit areas. He recalled working some 230 days straight before taking a Saturday off. The military veteran who loves God, country, and community, that's probably why you haven't heard of him, by the way, honestly. we're going to be cynical, but probably accurate. You know why you probably haven't heard of Jake Jarvis? It's because he's a military veteran who's a good old mountain boy who loves God, country, and community. So you probably haven't heard of him. You know, he doesn't really fit who we want to make heroes out of nowadays. And outsiders do not know that roads are still closed and there's still work for Jake to do. Now, this article that I read, it's like, I don't know, 7 pages long. Is that going to fit on an Instagram post? Is that going to fit in the character limit of a Facebook feed? Of course not. So there's two things going on here. Because Jake and who he is doesn't fit the stereotype of bad people, okay? Powers that be don't want to tell us about them. And then because we aren't always willing to dig deep enough to read the story, we don't hear about them. Now, who isn't going to come save people like the Millers or the 350 families and businesses that Jake has saved? Later on, it's talking about all these homes that can't rebuild because they had septic tanks that now they don't fit the code. And so the government won't let them rebuild. If your septic was washed away, no, you can't rebuild your house back, Jarvis said as they mulled over a solution for the victim. Sorry, your land's worthless. And why is it worthless? Because somebody that says a guy like Jake Jarvis is a bad dude, that won't talk about him, that won't put him on the news, is also telling you you can't rebuild your house that's been there for 150 years because, well, you know, it's bad because the septic tank isn't big enough and blah, 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 blah. Okay? I want you to think real hard. Now, what's good about this is it's things like this that remind us that, like, we're not crazy. You know, we look at the world and how it is and how it can seem hopeless. And how people that don't build things, that don't help their neighbor, that don't volunteer their time like this, they just whine and complain, okay, and riot. Why, that isn't what we should be holding up. That isn't what's real. But you don't hear about people like Jake and you think you're crazy. You go, well, maybe I'm the problem. Well, I'll tell you another place that fits in the same theme that my wife and I have thought about for a long time. And it was this thing popped up because sometimes, you know, you can find good things on Twitter in short, little brief accounts. And this popped up. Something my wife and I have been talking about a long time. One of the biggest problems with modern Hollywood is that they basically stopped making films that families can watch together. They make movies for kids that will bore adults to death and movies for adults that are too objectionable or mature to show kids. Even movies that are 95% family-friendly will be ruined by a random unnecessary sex scene or totally pointless and gratuitous vulgarity sprinkled throughout. Some movie studio can make a lot of money by just producing good films that are entertaining for a 40-year-old and inappropriate for a 10-year-old. It ain't hard to do. Hollywood used to do it all the time. Now, that's true, okay? When my wife and I've got a big family, we got 9 kids. You know, over the years, we're looking, what's a movie that we all could watch and we all could enjoy? Inevitably, you got to go back to like the 60s, okay? Because anything since then they call a kids movie that an adult might like, they are going to put in some like sexual innuendo. They're going to have the mom dressed like a hooker, you know, big boobs and a tight top. They're going to have the kids dropping curse words to be cool. And you're sitting there with your kids and you're like, okay, I'm endorsing this if I'm sitting here with them and I can't really watch this. So let's watch Treasure Island from 1963 for the 5th time because, you know, men are polite and women look like ladies and, you know, they don't just curse to like get a rise. And that, they could do that. That's most families, by the way. I mean, in most families, like sit around the dinner table and mom is like going, how sexy can I look? And the kids are like, you know, seeing what curse words they can get away with. Not really. You know, I mean, that's life. You know, teenagers push back and, you know, we live in a world people want to go look at me. But in general, you know, you're at the dinner table, you're with your family, you're going on vacation, trying to be that way? Not really. Sad thing is there are some people trying to be that way because they see these movies and they think that's the way you're supposed to be. Now, what's the scariest thing I want to point out to you about what I just read, okay? And this is why I think the biggest reason we are so divided and we just can't even have truthful conversations about anything, okay? We might disagree on what is appropriate for a 10-year-old. You know what I mean? You might think a few curse words here and there in a movie, no problem. I might think, man, I wish they weren't in there. I'm not going to let my kids watch them. I get it, okay? I'm not a Puritan, okay? I could see that there's like a gray area there. You know, we could argue what's appropriate, but I don't think we could argue that movies from 40 years ago did not have as much of that stuff. There were more movies you could sit down and watch with your family, okay? You can't disagree with that. And then I think we would all agree that Jake Jarvis is a good dude, man. That what he's doing in those mountains, saving people's homes, you know, that, you know, their insurance won't cover your house. There are people in this article that now have 2 mortgages, and one of them is on a home that's destroyed. That to get the second mortgage, they had to agree to the bank to pay back the first mortgage on the home that was destroyed that their insurance wouldn't cover. And there's hundreds of people like that. Okay? I think we would all agree Jake Jarvis is a good dude. Now here's the thing. You would only find this out if you looked at 2 sources that a lot of people call, you know, far-right Nazis, racist. Okay? The one about the movies is from Matt Walsh. Okay? He's a guy, now again, personally, have I ever read any content of his I thought was objectionable? Not really. He did a documentary called What is a Woman, where he went around asking people, hey, in this world of multi-genders, what is a woman? Can you define it? And that's literally all he did was ask people, and he let people speak for themselves. And the humor kind of came from people trying to answer what that was. And so because of that, a lot of people hate him. But I don't think there's anything wrong about what he said about a movie. And then over here, this comes from a news source called the Epoch Times, which is owned by a Chinese dissident. And a lot of people don't like this, the Epoch Times, because I would not say they're far right. I would say they're kind of like a little bit right of the middle, but they're very traditional. Okay, they're very, as Jake is in this story, you know, God, family, country, and it is owned by a Chinese dissident. And so they do have a lot of articles against China that even though everyone talks about the dangers of China, man, China makes all our products. You know, China buys all our treasury bonds, and people don't like it. And so because of that, they're kind of on the naughty list. And that's kind of what we've done, isn't it? You know, we don't listen to each other. We don't dig in and find the facts. We don't have conversations. We just label. You're bad. And it goes both ways, by the way, you know. It goes both ways. You know, both sides do not listen to the other. And then over here, you got these little extremes, you know, crazy people. And then that gets shown as like, yeah, what it means to be a liberal is this crazy person. And what it means to be a conservative is this crazy person. And the only rational people are the people in the middle, even though an issue might not have a middle. There is one. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, it's just crazy. We label everybody. I'm probably going to get labeled for talking about this. But at the end of the day, here's what I want to come back to. Let's just get to the core of what this is about. And let's try focusing on that. Help your neighbor. Help your neighbor. I mean, you get mad at the world. You get mad at politics. You get mad at what some country half the world away is doing. It's probably causing you to lose sight of your neighbor. There's probably somebody near you. You don't have to have an excavator like Jake Jarvis does, but there's probably somebody near you. Maybe it's an elderly person and they need their yard raked, or they need their snow shoveled. Or maybe there's a single mom and she would love somebody one night a week to watch the kids because she can't afford to get a babysitter and she wants to go out and maybe have some fun, or maybe look for a job. You know, maybe there's a kid who never had a father and he would love a mentor. He would love somebody to teach him the ways of the world. See, you don't got to be in North Carolina in the mountains to help somebody. And then do more with your kids. Realize if you're sitting there and not taking the effort to figure out a way to entertain them in an appropriate way, when you're watching that movie with them where all of a sudden there's someone dressed inappropriately that makes everybody uncomfortable, and all of a sudden there's someone saying something you would not let them say at the dinner table, and you just sit there, and instead of doing something about it, you put up with it. You know, you just taught your kids, that's cool, that's okay. Okay, that's on you, man. That ain't on the fact that we don't got a good Disney movie anymore. And maybe what we need to hear are more stories about people doing good and positive things, because you know what? You get what you feed yourself. If we only feed ourselves on the bad, you're going to get more of it. If you only feed yourself on the hate and the finger pointing, you're going to get more of it. You're going to encourage it. People are going to do what they think makes the news, but on the flip side of it, you transform your community one neighbor at a time, one person at a time. You help a child or a kid one person at a time. And then we demand that we hear about it. I want to hear more Jake Jarvis's. You know, in this article, it was really cool. It's like a long form online article. So when you printed out all the text, it was like 7 pages long, but there were all kinds of these big pictures. And you saw the faces of the men and women and the families that he helped. You saw the boulders. You saw the excavators. It was motivating. You wanted to be a Jake Jarvis. You wanted to go, what can I do to go help people? Whoever that is. That's the world I want to live in, man. I want to live in a world where I think my neighbor is looking for a way to help me and other neighbors, not where my neighbor is holed up getting angry and pointing fingers and plotting who they're going to blame for not being happy. I don't want to live in that world, man. You don't want to live in that world, because you know what ends up happening in a world like that? Everything burns down. Man, look at the French Revolution. Everything burns down. Everything burns down. But when you live in a world where everybody is building people up, beautiful things grow, okay? Neighborhoods get cleaner. Roads get taken care of. Kids are able to play outside. Everybody's happier. And maybe we'll get more people making movies that a 40-year-old dad can sit down with their 10-year-old kid and they both can get a laugh and neither one of them are going to be uncomfortable. And when you're done, you're not going to feel like you need to go wash your mouth out with soap. You're just going to be like, man, that was really fun. Put that in the collection. We'll watch that in 10 years. Heck, maybe 40 years from now, my 10-year-old will be showing it to their 10-year-old. Do some good today, my friend. Be a Jake Jarvis. Find an old movie to watch with your kids. Turn off the news. Don't be a hater. Don't be a world burned downer. Be the kind of person that picks people up. That you go around your community and if it was bad enough, you'd be willing to spend 230 days. 230 days straight without taking a day off because it was the right thing to do. That's Jake Jarvis. So, in honor of Jake Jarvis, look him up, learn more about this guy and what he's done. I am Silouan. It's great to be with you. It's really cold here. We're going to go start a fire and play board games in my house. But until next time, peace, and I am out.